Kody Brown sat by himself in the middle of the room, a silence so heavy it seemed like judgment itself. The lighting wasn't harsh, but nor was it soft, just enough to reveal the fatigue on his face. He appeared older, not due to time, but due to truth at last, catching up. His tie was undone, his fingers drummed against the desk, not from boredom, but from nervousness. This wasn't the type of court that you flee from. This was the type where everyone that you've ever disappointed is present, and they've got the receipts. Across from him were Christine, Janelle, and Meri, not side by side, but close enough to feel together. They didn't say a word. They didn't have to. Their eyes did, eyes that once looked at him with trust, eyes that once believed in his words. Today they were heavy, sharp, and still. No lawyers, no audience, just family, just truth, and the quiet sting of betrayal that hung between each breath. Behind the wives, 3 chairs sat, vacant, at least, for the moment. They were held for the ones who would have the last say. The children? The ones who had endured the shadow of Kody's decisions, long after the cameras quit rolling. A chair had Garrison's name on it. The anguish in that name itself was more vocal than any indictment. Kody moved, attempted to catch Christine's eyes, but she wouldn't blink. She glared at the wall behind him, as if she didn't care to squander her vision on a man who'd already retreated from her life. Janelle sat like a pillar, collected but heavy with weight. The type of weight that a woman gains from years of holding a family of people together by the fingertips, while the man who sits at the top plays favorites and feigns love. Meri just looked like she had nothing to lose anymore. Her silence was more than quiet. It was empty. Not sad. Not angry. Just finished. Sometimes silence isn't peace. It's the last scream of someone who's endured too much. A woman's voice cut through the silence. Not one of the wives, but a voice of neutrality. Cold, official. The voice of the room itself. Kody Brown, it said, you are here today because those who know you best have requested something simple. Not revenge. Not punishment. Just accountability. Kody leaned forward. He almost said something, but something in Christine's face held him back. A flicker. Not warmth. Not pity, but a reminder that whatever it was he was going to say, they'd heard it before, and it wasn't enough. Prior to hearing any testimony, the voice went on. You are welcome to listen. No interruptions, no defense. You will hear their truth, and then you may respond. If you still think you can. The room stopped. It wasn't a momentary thing. It was a warning. Christine rose first. She moved slowly, purposefully. She didn't pace. She didn't fumble. Her voice didn't tremble. When she spoke, it was distinct and frighteningly calm. You told me once, she said. I can't make you happy if you're always angry. And I thought that I was the issue. That my irritation, my hurt, my aloneness, that it was mine alone. She glanced down for a moment, not to compose herself, but to recall how far she'd actually traveled. I lost my anger years ago, Kody. You just didn't realize it. You were too busy constructing a kingdom where only a single queen reigns. Robyn's name was not spoken. There was no need for it. The bite hung in the air. Christine faced the voice in the room. Proof? I have it. I kept diaries, messages, voicemails, years of attempting, years of silence. She placed a folder on the table. She did not open it. She didn't need to. It was there. That was sufficient. You say you were fair, she went on. But fairness doesn't hide. Fairness doesn't play favorites. Fairness shows up. And you, Kody, you only showed up for one person. The rest of us, we were background noise. The truth doesn't always scream. Sometimes it just stands there unshakable. And that's what makes it inevitable. Janelle stood next. Her presence was different. Not furious, not tearful, just weary, but unbreakable. I stood up for you longer than I should have, she told him. Because I believed that silence was loyalty. But honesty without loyalty is only fear. And I was in fear, Kody. Fear of destroying this family. Fear of the guilt. She was looking at him now. Actually looking. But do you have any idea what fear feels like when it becomes clarity? It feels like freedom. And when I said to you that I was finished, I meant that. Not only with the marriage, with the illusion. She unfolded a wad of paper. This is a copy of our family's budget. From 5 years ago. It was to be equal. 4 homes, 4 futures. You altered this plan 2 months later. Transferred money. Altered names. Shielded one house. While the rest of us struggled. Her voice didn't go up. It didn't have to. You didn't just pick Robyn. You picked her bank account. You picked her children. And you made our children think they weren't enough. Meri was last. She didn't stand immediately. She waited. Let the silence come up for air. When she finally stood, the air was thicker. I remained because I constantly thought things would go full circle, she explained. That if I waited long enough, the man I married would appear again. She smiled, nearly. The type of smile that lacks joy. The only acceptance, but you never returned. Not truly. You merely dissolved into the version of yourself who loved the spotlight more than the people in front of it. Her fingers trembled only slightly, but she continued to speak. You embarrassed me. On national television, you announced in front of the whole nation that you didn't love me, and I stayed anyway, because I thought perhaps, maybe just perhaps, we were still a family. She glanced at the 3 vacant chairs behind her. But the children? They saw what we didn't see. They saw who you are. And they left, not out of rebellion, but because they had to protect themselves. When the kids walk away, it's not a family anymore. It's a warning. Kody didn't say anything. He couldn't. Because for the first time in years, the women in his life weren't begging. They weren't pleading. They weren't asking for his permission. They were telling the truth. And the truth was finally louder than him. The room didn't change temperature-wise, but Kody felt colder. Not from temperature, but from loneliness. The type of cold that seeps into your body when you see the heat you relied on wasn't yours anymore. He always had some sort of hold. A camera to point at. A discussion to control. A wife to reclaim just long enough to maintain the facade. But not today. Today no one was pursuing him. They had already released him. He was just the last one to catch on. Christine leaned back in her chair, her arms crossed, not in rebellion, but in completion. Janelle wasn't even looking at him anymore. She was looking straight ahead, as if there was nothing to see. And Meri, her eyes were open, but that version of herself that had loved Kody, that woman wasn't there anymore. The voice came back. Mr. Brown, at this point in the hearing, witnesses may step forward. The panel has requested the presence of individuals directly affected by your family leadership, specifically your adult children. The first to speak will be Gwendolyn Brown. The back door opened. Behind the wives, Gwen entered slowly, shoulders rigid but firm. Her very presence changed the mood in the room. She wasn't there to mourn. She wasn't there to apologize. She was there to be listened to. She didn't sit. She stood a few feet from her father. I used to watch you and think, maybe if I did more, you'd look my way, she said. If I smiled more. If I didn't ask too many questions. If I just kept quiet. But it never worked, did it? Kody's mouth opened, only a little bit, but he caught himself. Perhaps it was the tone of her voice. Perhaps it was the way the others were staring at him now. He was beginning to realize. This had nothing to do with old fights. This was about something deeper. I saw you treat Robyn's children like royalty, Gwen went on. I saw you vanish from holidays. I heard the excuses, Dad. All of them. Too exhausted. Too busy. Too far away. But I also saw you for their dance recitals, their birthdays, their new home, she breathed. We weren't demanding diamonds, we were demanding time, for love that didn't have terms. She reached in her purse and took out a small photograph and put it on the table next to her. It was worn folded at the corners. It was of a young Gwen sitting on Kody's lap, with both of them smiling. It was an old one, a period in her life, before disappointment seeped into her voice. I used to believe this meant something, she said. But now I realize, it was just for the cameras. There is a time when even memories no longer feel secure. She spun around, moved to her seat, and did not glance back. Kody blinked angrily. His throat constricted. He did not think it would hurt so much. In some way, he always figured his children would get it someday. That they'd glance back and see how much effort he made. But now the reality was more apparent than ever. What they remembered was who he was not. The door opened once more. Leon Brown, the voice commanded. Leon came in quietly, but their presence was authoritative. They didn't falter, didn't blink, and when they stood in front of Kody, the room caught its breath once more. I'm not here to tell you about my life, Leon said. I'm here to tell you that family doesn't just walk away because it gets in the way. Their words landed like rocks, courteous, measured, and incisive. You quit coming. You quit asking. You quit caring. And then you created a story about why you were the victim. Leon caught a quick glance at Meri, whose fists were bunched in her lap, then back at Kody. I emerged because I had to exist. I stayed hidden because you needed me to be someone I wasn't. You taught me how to conceal myself. But you also taught me what love shouldn't taste like. They held up a creased piece of paper. This is the last message you wrote me before I quit responding. You wrote, I'm still your dad, but I can't support decisions I don't get. And that's when it occurred to you. You didn't want to get it. They put the letter down. I'm not asking for anything. I'm just telling you. You lost me when you gave up. When that child is able to say goodbye without tears, the damage is already done. Leon sits beside Gwen. Neither of them glance at Kody, and for once he isn't glancing at them either. The silence draws. But then, door 3. Garrison Brown. No one has budged. That chair still sits empty. But a small wooden box was brought in instead of a person by another grown child, who was not named. They set it on the table carefully, as if it held more than words, as if it held sorrow itself. This statement, the voice said, was penned by Garrison Brown, prior to his leaving the family home. It was not handed over directly. It was discovered among his belongings. The box opened up. One page lay within. The voice read out, Dad, you told me we were a team, but when I asked you to appear, you said I was being disrespectful. When I protested, you said I was poisoned by my mother. I guess the only loyalty you have respect for is the kind that doesn't question you. I adore my sibling. I adore Mom, but I couldn't continue pretending. You made a decision, and I had to make mine. If you're actually reading this, you likely still believe I got you wrong, that I'm upset for no reason. But I am not upset anymore. I am done. The room didn't breathe for a moment. Even Robyn looked down now, her fingers twisted together in her lap. Whatever story she had told herself, that Garrison was just rebellious, just emotional, was starting to fall apart. Christine's eyes were glassy. Janelle turned her head away completely. Meri's lip trembled. But Kody, he didn't budge. Not his hands, not his eyes, not even to swipe the sweat starting to form at his temple. He sat like a man who had witnessed his own reflection break. When your child leaves you with silence, the echo can last a lifetime. The voice came back, more softly this time. Mr. Brown, you have heard now the testimony of your wives and your children. The intent of this hearing is not punishment, it is acknowledgement. You may now reply. Kody rose, but unsurely, his tone wasn't angry, not even resentful. It was smaller. I didn't know, he said. It wasn't persuasive. It wasn't sufficient. I tried. He started once more. But not a word came out. He gazed at Christine. She didn't budge. He gazed at Janelle. She looked back with unwavering judgment. Meri didn't even look up. He gazed at Gwen. Leon, the box that contained Garrison's last words. I thought I was being strong. He finally spoke in a whisper. I thought leading meant being right. There was no clapping, no response, just truth. Sitting there quietly, with arms crossed, he sat back down. And for the first time in his life, Kody Brown was silent. Kody didn't recall sitting down. His legs had shifted, but his mind remained behind, frozen somewhere between Gwen's soft disappointment and Garrison's last words. He had drifted through life, believing he was misunderstood. But today, silence surrounding him wasn't misunderstanding. It was understanding and rejection. The women didn't party with his suffering. They weren't there for revenge. That made it worse. Their peace was more weighty than wrath. Their quiet demonstrated that they'd already worked through the grief. They were simply allowing him an opportunity to catch up. The voice in the room offered no solace. It just proceeded. At this time, further testimony can be introduced. Robyn Brown, you have been asked to testify. All eyes turned. Robyn didn't stand immediately. She regarded Kody, her face pinched, expressionless, and then she rose, slowly moving to the middle. Not next to Kody, not in the vicinity of the wives, alone. Her fists were crossed in front of her, her breathing minimal. She wasn't weeping, although her eyes had the potential for it, but not out of guilt, out of panic. I didn't mean for this, she whispered. I never meant to be the cause of the family's disintegration. She faced Christine. I didn't steal him, she said. But I also didn't stop him. Christine didn't flinch. Robyn's words hovered, set down. No solace settled where too much had already been removed. I thought, if I could just keep things okay, if I was quiet, he'd get better. He'd treat everyone evenly again. She gazed down. But the more I was quiet, the more he faded into our house, into my children, into me. Protection can sometimes be silent, and silence too can annihilate. Robyn moved closer to the table. Her voice stumbled now, but she continued. I made him think that I was the only one who loved him, and I think a part of me enjoyed that. I wanted to be loved. I wanted to be chosen. She turned to Janelle. I listened to what you said about honesty without loyalty, and it stung, because I was loyal, but not honest with myself. I didn't see the pain in your eyes. I didn't notice the empty seats at birthdays. I said you weren't trying hard enough. Janelle didn't move, her face unmoved. Robyn went on. I thought I was keeping the family intact, but now I realize I was keeping him from you. She turned to Kody at last. You had to fight for them, and you didn't. You let me be the excuse. Kody's mouth opened but still, he said nothing. His eyes were locked on her, as if he saw her for the first time. Not the fantasy, not the ally, but the mirror. Robyn drew back into her chair. Quiet now. She didn't touch Kody's hand, and he didn't offer hers. The room felt colder. The voice returned. This proceeding will now enter its final phase. Those seated here may offer closing reflections. The goal is not reconciliation, it is recognition. Christine stood again, not with the fire of the first time, but with the steadiness of someone who had carried a burden long enough. You told me you were misunderstood, Kody, that none of us were your supporters, but we were your supporters for a longer time than you were your own. She indicated not with her finger, but with her gaze to the 3 children's chairs. They needed a father. We needed a partner. You gave us a shadow, and you occupied your quadrant of the house, while the rest of us shivered in the cold. She wasn't yelling. I will never hate you, she told him. Because hate takes energy, and I'm conserving mine for the people who never quit coming. She sat down. Janelle was next. I don't regret my time with this family. I regret thinking it was mine to keep together by myself. She looked around. I see strong women. I see courageous children. What I no longer see is a husband. A marriage isn't kept together by memory. It lives by effort. Meri rose slowly. Her voice was quiet, nearly fractured. I loved you longer than I should have. I forgave more than I admitted, and I waited long after the goodbye had already been said. She exhaled long and low. But you made your choice, Kody. Every time you turned your back on us, every time you rewrote the story so that you could feel good about yourself, you chose this. I just finally chose to stop pretending. She didn't sit right away. She regarded him, actually looked. And for the very first time there was no hurt in her face, no yearning, only clarity. You used to tell me we were a team. Turns out we were extras in your play. And with that, she sat down again. No tears. Kody massaged his jaw, his face impassive. His reflex response, defensiveness, bluster, blame, wasn't forthcoming. Perhaps he was exhausted, or perhaps he knew it wouldn't count. He stood up, and for the first time, his voice lacked authority. I know I let you down, he said. He glanced at the wives, at Gwen, at Leon, at the untouched box. I believed I was doing the right thing. I told myself being strong was to keep going, no matter how much it hurt you. I believed leadership was making a decision. His eyes momentarily closed. But loveless leadership, that's just control. He glanced at Robyn, then slowly looked away. I didn't ask enough questions. I didn't listen. And I never said I was wrong, even when I was pleading for grace that I did not deserve. He put hands on the table. His voice cracked. I miss my kids. I miss the family. Not the one on TV, the real one. I see it now. I see what I destroyed. No one broke in. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even know if I'd forgive me. But I'm here, and I'm hearing you. He gazed at the chair where Garrison would have sat. I'm sorry. Apologies don't bridge the gap, but they demonstrate you finally saw the fire. The room stood in silence for a long time. Then the voice spoke again. This concludes the hearing. The facts have been presented. The truths have been spoken. What is left now is up to time. No gavel, no sentence, only finality. Christine, Janelle, and Meri stood up and left together. No words were exchanged between them, but something intangible went with them. A burden was lifted. A tale concluded. Gwen and Leon walked silently after. Gwen put her photo away in her coat. Leon left a letter on the table. Robyn remained sitting for another moment. Then she got up, not toward Kody, but away, and Kody remained behind, alone, silent. Not that he had nothing to say, but that all that had been said was already said by him without him. The table was bare, but Kody hadn't budged. All the others had departed. Christine with held head, Janelle with not a backward glance. Meri with that eerie calmness. Robyn with unguessable silence. Even the kids had vanished. But Kody sat there, his palms still flat on the table, as if he were attempting to plant roots in a storm that had already washed through. The wooden box that held Garrison's letter hadn't been touched, not by him. It sat beside him like a silent witness, untouched and yet louder than anything spoken aloud. He exhaled slowly, not even realizing he'd been holding his breath. He wasn't angry. Not that. That was the most bizarre thing. No blaze, no counterattack, no need to get up and scream. Just silent. And underneath, a weird and awful brightness. A man's realization when he finally understands what destruction is around him wasn't a mistake. It was his doing. The toughest part is not the fall. It's knowing you were the one who leapt. He rubbed the back of his neck. His body ached, not from age, but from the weight of every lie he had believed to protect himself. He had told himself for so long that they were just missing him, not trying hard enough, or that he was being left behind. But today, it rang more true than ever. He had left them first. He rested back in the chair and shut his eyes. Memories started coming up, not of the show, not of the cameras or rehearsed family gatherings, but of tiny quiet things. Janelle laughing in the kitchen, as the kids tore around in mismatched pajamas. Christine sitting on the porch steps with arms around Truly, watching the sun set. Meri decorating the Christmas tree by herself after everyone else had gone in. And then, the absences, the forgotten birthdays, the unanswered calls, the last-minute cancellations, the time he'd forgotten Gwen's graduation dinner. The fact that he always had an excuse, but never a fix. He opened his eyes once more. The room remained empty. He extended his hand slowly to Garrison's letter, pausing just short of his fingers, making contact with the box. His hand lingered for a moment, wondering if he even had the right to open it once more. But he did lift the lid and peeped inside. The page hadn't shifted, but now, he read it again. This time, not with the father's mind attempting to justify himself, but with the man's heart who had used up all his defenses. I guess the only loyalty you respect is the kind that doesn't question you. That line didn't hurt the first time, but now, it ripped something open, because it was true. That had been the pattern. From Meri's quiet loyalty to Christine's frustration, to Janelle's long-suffering strength, he had mistaken patience for approval, mistaken silence for agreement. And when they began to push back, he left. Not physically, but emotionally. He turned toward the only place where he didn't feel challenged. Robyn, and even now, even that connection felt hollow. He repeated the words in his head. You had to fight for them, and you didn't. She was correct. And the worst thing? She had been an enabler. And yet she was braver than he was in the end. At least she'd owned up to it. He wondered where she had disappeared to after the hearing. Back home? Out for fresh air? Or perhaps elsewhere entirely? Elsewhere to be alone with her own guilt. Sometimes the people we lean the most on are the ones who end up leaning away. He stood finally. His legs were stiff, his heart even stiffer. As he left the room, his footsteps reverberated in the hall, not because it was huge, but because the emptiness made his steps reverberate. Outside, the wind smacked him harder than anticipated. Sharp, final. The sun was dipping. Orange skies spanned the horizon, like a farewell letter, penned by the world itself. He didn't know where to go. Home didn't feel like a destination anymore. Not because it wasn't there, but because he no longer knew which house even counted as home. Not Meri's, not Janelle's, not Christine's, and now, maybe not even Robyn's. For a moment, he just stood in the parking lot, keys in hand, not moving, just watching the sky, just feeling the ache. Somewhere at the bottom of his pocket, his phone vibrated. A text, most likely a news update or some inane something. But when he looked at it, the screen had from Savannah. Mom said you had a hearing today. Hope you listened. That's all. It wasn't hate. It wasn't an olive branch either. It was worse. It was distance. Controlled. Chosen. Measured. Kody read the message until the screen turned black. He didn't respond. He couldn't. Later that evening, Robyn waited when he finally came through the door. Her face was white. Her eyes were red. But she didn't rush to him. She didn't ask how it went. She already knew. She stood in the kitchen, arms over chest, leaning against the counter. He placed his keys in the bowl near the door, and for the first time, the quiet between them did not feel like comfort. It felt like something was breaking. I brewed some tea, she said softly. He nodded, but did not get up. She sat at the table. I didn't know what to say. Afterwards, he sat down beside her. Slowly, the chair groaned under him. I was doing the right thing, he said, holding it all together. Robyn regarded him warily. You weren't. But I made you think that. He nodded, but it wasn't assent. It was capitulation. Do you think they'll ever return? He asked. Robyn blinked. They didn't abandon a house, Kody. They abandoned you. The agony of being left behind is nothing to the agony of being the cause of someone's leaving. They sat in silence once more. Eventually, she pushed a photograph across the table. One of the entire family, taken on better days, or at least days that had appeared better on the surface. I used to think this picture meant something, she said. Now I just see everyone pretending. He gazed at the picture. His hand never reached for it. He merely stared. And then, at long last, the words he'd been holding back all day escaped. I failed them. Robyn didn't say a word. She didn't hurry to comfort. She didn't argue. She just sat with him. Because sometimes the only thing to do with a broken man is to let him hear the sound of his own regret. Christine had always known how to rise from ashes. Before she ever left Kody, she'd already begun picking up the shattered bits of herself and laying them carefully down. She didn't hurry the process. She didn't require a grand departure. Just truth. Just enough illumination to move forward without apology. She went home after the hearing to an empty kitchen. Truly was out at a friend's, and the silence enveloped her like a blanket, thick but cozy. She brewed tea, the sort Kody never cared for. Jasmine with lemon, her own personal comfort drink. She sat in the chair and let the steam batter her face, her palms cradling the cup, as if it were the first tangible item she'd grasped in years. The hearing hadn't shaken her. It had confirmed her. For so long, she'd believed maybe she had been too emotional, too needy, too demanding. But hearing Gwen, hearing Leon, even hearing Robyn confess the truth, those moments stripped the final layers of guilt from her chest. She hadn't a family, she'd endured one. She took out a notebook from the drawer, not a journal, only paper and a pen. She made a list, not goals, only moments she wanted to take back. Sit on the porch without expecting someone, laugh without questioning it, be loved without being graded. Healing isn't always a breakthrough. Sometimes it's a list of soft promises. Over town, Janelle ironed laundry with deliberate serenity. She'd never been melodramatic. Even in heartbreak, her sorrow expressed itself in motion. In dinners prepared, socks folded, gas tanks filled, checklists completed. It was how she remained strong for the children, for herself, for everyone but the man who couldn't value that kind of strength. The hearing had taken a long time to arrive. When she stood in that room, she didn't stand there like a woman facing off with her ex-husband. She stood there like a mother standing up for the legacy of her children. Garrison's letter still lingered in her head. Not in words, but in tone. Detached, final. The kind of heartache that didn't shriek. It just shut the door and walked away. She put in a clean shirt and hesitated. The quiet at her house was unlike the quiet Christine's. Not serene. Simply empty. The sort of quiet that made you realize someone wasn't returning. Not that they couldn't, it was that they wouldn't. And that wasn't her fault. It never was. She grabbed her phone. There were texts that hadn't been read. One from Savannah. One from Madison. A meme from Hunter. Checking in, without prompting. Because although the building had crumbled, her friendships did have foundations. Deep ones. She smiled to herself. A little saddened, but still genuine. She'd been faithful. She'd been resilient. And now, at last, she was liberated. And she no longer needed Kody's definition of family. The strongest women are often the ones who no longer need to prove how strong they are. Meri's house was dim. She liked it that way. Lamps instead of overhead lights. Soft shadows instead of harsh clarity. She hadn't said much at the hearing, but that didn't indicate she didn't feel it. If anything, her silence had been more vocal than any words she might have uttered. She'd already said all she needed to over the years. Said it in counseling sessions, in private conversations, in texts Kody never responded to, in looks across the room, when he gazed everywhere but at her. She was finished repeating herself. Now she was only attempting to find herself again. She stood in her bedroom mirror, not to judge, not to critique, just to see. She hadn't done it in a while. Not actually. She used to question whether she'd gotten old too quickly, whether her outfits were too dull, whether she had to lose some weight in order to get the man who no longer desired her back. But now, the mirror felt different. She didn't see flaws. She saw a woman who stayed too long, but also a woman who finally got up and left. A survivor. Her phone buzzed. A message from Gwen. Thanks for not talking down to me. Your being here was everything. Meri smiled. For the first time that morning, it reached her eyes. She responded in only 2 words. I heard you. Sometimes presence is stronger than defense. Meanwhile, Robyn sat by herself in the living room of a home which once seemed full. Her children were upstairs, but the commotion seemed far away. Not only due to the walls, due to the guilt. She expected Kody to say something more when he returned home, but instead he sat alongside her at the table, still and hunched, and then he headed upstairs, without taking a sip from his tea. Now she sat with the photo still in front of her, the one she'd shown him, the smiling family, all dressed up, everyone pretending. She stared at her own face in the picture. She remembered the day it was taken, how she had coached her kids to smile, how she'd straightened Kody's tie before the camera clicked, how she thought, just for a moment, we made it. We're together. But she knew now, they were never together. Really, not the way it counted. Protectiveness had been enabling, her silence, complicity. And now she didn't know who she was, outside of the tale she'd held for so many years. She wondered if the other wives were lighter, if releasing it had set them free, and if perhaps only she'd been holding on to a man who was always intended to be alone. When the story doesn't hold up, even the conclusion is a relief. And what about Kody? He lay awake that night. He was in bed, gazing at the ceiling, repeating every phrase. Gwen's serene disappointment, Leon's surgical precision, Garrison's eerie farewell. He couldn't dispute any of it, and that kept him awake. He'd spent years working out answers, justifying choices, defending his stance, but now that there were no longer any people to persuade, the only option remaining was reality. And it didn't bother with excuses. Sometime around dawn, he rose from bed and descended to the first floor. Robyn didn't stir. The house was quiet. He sat at the kitchen table, the same spot where Robyn had pushed that picture toward him. He picked it up again. This time he turned it over. On the back was a date, and one sentence written in Robyn's handwriting. First family photo. All of us together. He ran his thumb across the words, then stared into the photo again. They had been smiling, but now it looked like mourning. And maybe it always had been. Kody didn't get up from the table until the sun poked through the kitchen window. He hadn't even realized the sky was changing. Just sat there all night with the photo in his hand and quiet in his chest. The kind of quiet that happens when you quit running out of anger and finally sit down with sorrow. He'd lost them, and not at all in one instant, but in years. Death by 1,000 evasions, by lost birthdays, broken promises, and apologies made too late, or not made at all. The ironic part was, he used to believe he was the one keeping the family together. But now he knew, they were keeping him, and they'd finally released him. He put the picture back in the drawer. He didn't rip it up, didn't dispose of it. It didn't deserve to be on the wall anymore, but it was still a part of the story. Upstairs, everything was still. Robyn had taken the children to see her sister. She hadn't wished him goodbye, just written on the fridge, give us some space. 4 words, clean, direct, indisputable. And he knew. Not because she was punishing, but because she didn't know what else to do. She'd been faithful for so long, hanging on to the version of him that he no longer had faith in himself. And now even that was starting to come apart. The end of denial isn't loud. It's when silence finally feels like truth. Kody went out, for the first time in days. No phone, no keys, no place to go. He just walked, around the block, by familiar houses, by lawns he used to help his family mow when they lived nearby. Now they were spread out over states, time zones and decisions. He found himself at the location of the old cul-de-sac, the one where it started, where the wives had all lived together, side by side, under the shared belief that love would expand enough to encompass all of them. It hadn't. He was on the sidewalk, pockets shoved into his jacket. The houses appeared different now. New curtains on the windows, different cars parked out front, children playing in backyards that didn't recognize his name. Christine's old home boasted a new wreath on the door. He didn't approach, merely stood across the street and gazed. He recalled the last time he'd left that home angry. Christine had sobbed silently as he slammed the door and informed her that she was being selfish. She'd requested something simple, his time, justice. He provided her with space instead. That space was now permanent. Regret is the meanest type of memory, because you can't alter the way things end once the pages are filled. At home, Kody brewed himself coffee. Black. No sugar. His hunger had disappeared days earlier, but the habit lingered. He sat alone on the porch and listened to the silence. Not the kind that was peaceful, the echoing kind. He considered phoning Janelle, not to repair anything, just to hear her voice, possibly to apologize again, but he didn't, because this time, he knew she didn't owe him an audience. Instead, he grabbed a pad of paper. Something Gwen had said was running through his mind. We weren't asking for diamond, we were asking for time. He started writing, not a letter, not yet, just a list, the way Janelle used to when she was taming chaos. Apologize, without expectations. Show up, even when it's awkward. Speak even when the truth stings. Let them talk. Actually talk. It wasn't a plan, a beginning. He sat the pen down and gazed at the paper. And for the first time, Kody Brown didn't feel like a leader, or a husband, or a star, just a man, trying. While that Christine stood in her backyard, barefoot, watering flowers, truly played outside with a friend. Giggles carried on the wind. This was peace. It didn't taste like revenge. It tasted like reclamation. She still had bad days, still longed for the version of the family she wanted that to have existed. But increasingly those were being overridden by something else. Joy. Quiet, real joy. She was in love again. Not with a man, although that would follow later, but with herself, with her mornings, with her autonomy. She didn't ask what Kody was up to. She didn't haunt the news or follow the Reddit forums. She had closed that book with dignity. Freedom isn't boisterous. Sometimes it resembles a woman smiling to herself as she planted tomatoes. Janelle had converted her garage into a gym, not to lose weight, just to sweat away the sorrow. It was her ritual, her hour of lucidity. She boxed, intensely, and with each punch she released something. Garrison's laughter, his messages, the pain of missing him. She wasn't trying to get over it, she was trying to go on, because remaining in the sorrow didn't do him justice. Living did. She lit a candle for him every evening, said nothing, just sat and remembered. That was her new form of prayer, and she knew wherever Garrison was now, he was finally safe. Meri began to travel. She posted photos online, smiling, arms outstretched near mountain cliffs, ocean fronts, desert trails. She wasn't trying to brag, she was trying to breathe again. Alone no longer felt like failure, it felt like freedom. One night, she journaled a sentence she never thought she'd write. I think I'm finally happy. Some stories don't end with new love, they end with self-love. And that's enough. Robyn stayed quiet. The house felt empty with Kody moving like a ghost through it. She focused on the kids, their routine, their needs. But at night, she sat by the window with a glass of tea and stared into the dark. She hadn't left him, not yet, but something had changed. Perhaps she was coming to understand that silence, loyalty, and closeness weren't connection. And if Kody couldn't return to himself, no, not to her, but to himself, then even she would have to ask the most difficult question. What does love mean if it leaves everyone else behind? Neck to verging. Then Gwen received a letter, handwritten, from Kody. Only a few lines. I was wrong. You were brave. If you ever want to chat, I'm here now, silent and listening. She didn't answer. Not yet. But she didn't discard it either. And one morning, on the border of the cul-de-sac, a man stood by himself with flowers in his hand, not for display. Not for Instagram, simply because he recalled that Christine had a thing for wild daisies. He placed them by the gate, didn't knock, didn't hope for anything, just wandered off, slowly, his hands in his pockets, his face into the wind. Sometimes the healing isn't the reunion, it's appearing, even if no one is looking.